Who were the nymphs? For that matter, what are they? Anyone with any interest in Greek or Roman mythology have come across mention of them. Likely many. There were a lot of them, with Daphne, Psyche, and Echo being among the most famous. Were they goddesses? Nature spirits? Like so much in folklore, it depends on who you ask. In some versions, the nymphs were the daughters of the primordial night goddess, Nyx, born at the very beginning of the gods. In others, they were the daughters of the Titans or other gods. Whatever their origins, they were divine beings in their own right, or as Homer reputedly said in Pope's translation of the Iliad, when Zeus called a council of gods during the Trojan War, not one was absent, not a rural power that haunts the verdant gloom or rosy bower, each fair-haired dryad of the shady wood, each azure sister of the silver flood. One thing that is clear is the nymphs were powerful and little less than goddesses, whether they held the title or not. Usually depicted as beautiful young women, they were the guardians of mountains, water, and woodlands. So which ones you were likely to meet depended entirely on where you were. First, let's talk about the water nymphs, or naiads, those azure sisters Homer was on about. Their name is derived from a Greek word meaning to flow. As the name implies, they could be found in flowing waters, rivers, springs, fountains, and even spring-fed lakes, though sometimes the lake nymphs were considered a separate group. Regardless, they were generally considered cheerful and benevolent, but not always. The story of the Argonaut Hylas and an unnamed water nymph runs counter to that. Hylas was a young man and the servant of Hercules. When Hercules broke his oar near the coast of Mysia, he and Hylas went ashore to find wood to replace it. While Hercules made a new oar, Hylas went to get water from a clear mountain lake. The lake was the home of a water nymph who tempted Hylas into the lake and was so beguiling that he didn't resist when she pulled him under. Being mortal, he drowned. Maybe she didn't mean to do it. Maybe she just didn't realize mortals couldn't breathe in water. Regardless, Hercules abandoned Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece as a result, since he refused to stop looking for his friend. Next, we come to the mountain nymphs, the Oreads. These nymphs were especially associated with the virgin goddess Artemis and were known to accompany her on her hunts. Like Artemis, those Oreads who accompanied her had taken a vow of chastity. One story goes that Zeus, who had the hots for one named Callisto, slept with her by changing himself into the image of Artemis. Callisto was turned into a bear as punishment for being fooled. Hardly seems fair, but then the Greek deities were a lot like humans in that regard. To get them angry and perspective got thrown out the window. Their chaste nature ordained it bad luck for a man to so much as see Artemis or her entourage of Oreads while they were hunting. It was considered even worse luck to catch a glimpse of them having a bath in a mountain stream. Neither the goddess nor the nymphs would forgive you if that happened. Witness the story of the hunter Actaeon, who was changed into a stag when he, either by accident or on purpose, depending on the story, broke that taboo and as a deer was pursued and devoured by his own hounds. I call that very bad luck. Now we come to the woodland nymphs, the dryads, hamadryads, and the meliades. Dryads are commonly associated with oak trees. While of divine nature, they were long-lived but not immortal. When their tree died, so did they. Naturally, they were very protective of those trees. That trait was even more pronounced in the case of the hamadryads. While the dryads took the form of lovely young maidens, in the case of the hamadryads, that was only partly true. They appeared as young women from the waist up, while below they were literally part of the tree, often roots and nothing more. In some accounts, they appeared as fully formed women, but unlike the dryads, they were confined within the tree. Like the dryads, a hamadryad would only live so long as their tree, so they usually contrived, don't ask me how, to locate those trees in very remote areas where humans were unlikely to go. That didn't always work. One story relates how a man found a hamadryad tree and proceeded to cut it down, ignoring the pleas of the wood nymph within. Dying, she cursed his family to poverty, and every generation after him remained poor, no matter how hard they worked or whatever they tried. Also doesn't seem fair, at least so far as the generations thing, but if someone was chopping me with an axe, maybe I wouldn't be fair either. Then we come to the meliades. They were the nymphs of fruiting trees, and were said to also be the guardians of gardens and flocks. They do sound lovely, but they also had a darker side. It was said the meliades were fond of dancing, and could sometimes be seen enjoying that pastime around a group of rocks sacred to them. One day a bunch of shepherds happened to see them and left their flocks to watch. Rather than counting their blessings that they hadn't stumbled upon Artemis' bunch, by accident, these rough lads challenged the meliades to a dance-off. Of course, the boys lost and were transformed into a ring of trees around the sacred rocks for their presumption. The legend is, if you pass that place at night to this day, you can hear their lamentations on the wind. Unless you think I'm picking on the nymphs, and I wouldn't dare, the lives of the nymphs wasn't always dancing and turning peeping actaeons into ungulates. They were forever being pursued by Randy Pans and Zeuses and Apollos, and usually punished if one did manage to catch them. Then there is the sad tale of the nymph Echo, who had the misfortune to fall in love with a youth named Narcissus, who, as the name may have hinted, didn't love anyone but himself. Worse, she was also being pursued by the god Pan, between being completely ignored by Narcissus and not ignored enough by Pan. She finally fled to a remote forest where she slowly pined away from unrequited love until there was nothing left but her voice. Worse, she can only repeat what she hears, which is what an echo is to this day. Seriously, you didn't think that was acoustics, did you?